soon as last night, when it became evident that there was not going to be this blue wave, it was one county in Florida, Dade County, D-A-D-E, Dade County. And when that became clear that Trump was going to carry that, that's when the market made the adjustment. They said, okay, there's not going to be a blue wave. It means there's a smaller fiscal, which means a big rally in U.S. bonds today. And people realized that we get like a gridlock in the Senate, which also limits the ability to like raise corporate taxes. And so I think it all happened once there was no blue wave. I think everything changed. So one of the things that people thought was if Joe Biden was going to win, that corporate tax rate would go up, and on higher corporate tax rate, what do you think it would happen? More merger and acquisition activity. Now, under the lower tax regime, before taxes go up. And so, so some strategies still will depend on what happens with the election, the outcome. But I think that people feel more confident if instead of getting a $2 trillion fiscal stimulus the Democrats have been talking about, we'll probably get something closer to $1 trillion. Yeah, I think that's what I bought as well. I'll tell you the thinking behind it is that there was a setback in the technology stocks when they came out with earnings. The market was priced for perfection, but nobody really delivered perfection. Everybody had a little problem with their earnings. And I think that sell-off created, I think that this pullback was this buying opportunity that a lot of people were waiting for. But they were hesitant because of the election. A lot of people wanted to buy them, like the Apples of the world. And we had this pullback, and once the election was passed, they said, okay, because people thought, rightly or wrongly, that Joe Biden represented a Green New Deal. That's what the Republicans tried to paint him as, like endorsing a Green New Deal. And even though he was more environmental friendly than President Trump, he was not very extreme in his views. And so, but people thought he was, and they played it accordingly. So when they thought Biden was going to win with a blue wave, they bought the new energies, the Green New Deal. But when it became clear that that there's no blue wave, there goes the green story too. On the margins, and today is a good point too for you, because today the U.S. officially left the Paris Agreement. Trump had made it known that we were going to leave in a year. Well, now we left. Today is the day we leave. Joe Biden says on day one in the White House, he'll bring us back into the Paris Agreement, like every other country on Earth. I think that what's interesting, it seems to me, is that when Americans look at China, they see the CCP. They think it's one entity. They don't realize that there's different opinions and different personalities. And the same thing, I think, in the U.S. We look at the U.S. and we say, well, they've got two political parties. There's Republicans and Democrats. But what we really have is one elite. And the elite has two wings. But both wings are I think, committed to confronting China. I think that we'll see that the Democrats, the Biden administration, if that's what happens, is critical of China in Hong Kong, is critical of the human rights, is willing to sell advanced weapons to Taiwan, is working with the Quad, that's Japan, India, and Australia, to try to counter China's moves in the South China Sea. And so I think that the U.S. confrontation with China began before President Trump, and I think it exists long after him. And I think it's now a sort of I think it might change some of the personality involved, but I don't think it really changes the substance. Remember in 2016, one of the first things that President Trump did was call a Taiwanese president. I don't think that we will see a President Biden do that. I think that there's understood to be some red lines. We might disagree on where those red lines are, but I think that President Biden would be much more in the tradition of America. But that tradition, I think, is also butting heads with China. I think the move was so amazing because we got a nice bounce in the dollar, and then you see where the RMB is finishing in the offshore market, 665. This is just so I think that partly what happened. I think that a couple of things are operating, but I think that the volatility is what like say that's the most like striking thing. It's not that it moved very high or moved very low, but it's just that it moved back and forth so much. And I really think that it's hard to run a business. Think about not only the RMB, but like last night, the Mexican peso moved 3%. And how do you do a business? You're a business person, and you're like lucky to have a 5% profit margin, and the currency swings so much. For me, I could get concerned. The G7 have two mandates about currencies: the G7 and the G20. One is that they want the markets to determine exchange rates, but the second point, which a lot of my friends often forget, is that the other part of it is they don't want excessive volatility. They want the markets to determine things, but they don't want too much volatility. And I'd argue that last night is a good example about this volatility that makes no real economic sense. Yeah, so I think that in the very short term, think about what's happened is the Reserve Bank of Australia cut interest rates to start the week. Tomorrow, the Bank of England is going to cut interest rates. Sometime in December, the European Central Bank is going to cut interest rates or do other easing measures. The Federal Reserve is going to be lagging. The Federal Reserve meets tomorrow, but it's not going to do anything. It might talk a lot, but it's not going to do anything. And so I think that in the short run, because other central banks are easing, the Federal Reserve is not, that might favor the dollar a little bit. But next year, when we get the fiscal stimulus in the US, we get more perhaps monetary easing with the Federal Reserve buying more of the long-term securities. I think the dollar resumes its decline. And a falling dollar means not only a stronger euro and a stronger Japanese yen, but it also is going to mean a stronger RMB.